Hi everyone. Hello to anyone who's watching this. Still got no better at starting these. But today is my last Christmas broadcast. Probably not my last broadcast ever. In fact, definitely not my last broadcast ever. But to finish this kind of festive series that I've been doing, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. And I asked on Instagram whether anyone would be interested in doing like a festive Q&A, but more than a Q&A, because I sometimes think they can seem a bit like egocentric. I decided to open it up to, I just basically asked people what concerned them about Christmas time and any dilemmas and anything that was on their mind and anything that they were feeling worried about. And I said, just let me know and we can have a chat about it and we can hopefully do some problem solving. So that's what we're going to do. So I did have quite a few, not questions, just like topics or like things that people were worried about. I had quite a few come through on Instagram, which was really good. A lot of them I found were very, very, very similar. So what I'm going to do for the purpose of this is kind of group them into themes and hopefully go through it that way. And if anybody does watch this live and anything comes up and you want to ask anything yourselves, feel free. Feel free to share any of your own thoughts during this, and yeah, let's do it. I'm on my phone now, obviously, so I wrote down everything in advance, and I've had a little look around as well. I've had to think about these questions. So the majority of my audience on Instagram are also chronically ill, and I think without a doubt, not I think, because yeah, definitely without a doubt, the number one thing that people seem to be concerned about was pacing at Christmas time. And that's completely understandable because I was very much in that situation as well. And the problem is, at Christmas, there's a lot going on. There's a lot that you have to fit in, and it's obviously a really lovely time, and it is nice to have lots of things on. But when you're trying to manage your health alongside that, it can be difficult, and it can be very easy to feel overwhelmed, to think, oh, I've got this on this day, oh, don't know how I'm going to fit it in, don't know how I'm going to pace and manage everything. And yeah, I was thinking about what I would advise. And while I was thinking about it, I actually came across a resource online which was really, really helpful. And that was by Yorkshire Fatigue Clinic. Now, they are a really amazing service where I live, in York. And this Christmas, they've been sharing a lot of online content around coping at this time of year. And one of their posts that caught my attention was like a calendar, and it's a really brilliant post. And I should say at this point as well that everything I mention here I'm going to link on my Facebook page afterwards. So if you're wanting to find this, you can go onto my Facebook page, which is Life of Pippa blog, and it will all be on there. But it was this calendar, and they were basically advising you to make use of this calendar, write down everything you've got on, have a good look at it, and then make an informed decision. So if you could look at that rationally and think that's too much, you can take things off. You can make sure things are nice and spread out. That is one of the benefits of having that kind of monthly plan. You can see how close things are to other things and the kind of recovery time that you have. So I just thought that was a really useful resource, and there is still time to make the most of that. I know that we are quite a way through December and Christmas is coming up quite quickly, but there is still time to utilise that, especially as we seem to be going into the busy period now. So that's one resource for pacing. And then I also wanted to mention as well my friend Catherine, who blogs at The Reluctant Spoonie. She also put up a post like about Spoonie holiday tips, and she has a bit of advice from a personal perspective on that blog post. So I will also link that there as well. Hi Brian. I will say that again. So my blog page on Facebook is Life of Pippa blog. So just go on Facebook and just type in Life of Pippa blog and I should come up. And I will put a post on there after this with everything in it. So that's pacing. It's not an easy thing. It's something that I've struggled with a lot myself. And continue to as well. I sit here like I have this all sussed out. I really don't. But I have got better. So, you know, onwards and upwards. So the next thing that came up was explaining your condition to family and friends. And again, that's a really valid concern, because often you can find that although your immediate family and friends have like seen you on a day-to-day basis and they understand, if you've got more distant family who you only see at this time of year, it can be difficult to explain how your condition affects you, if they're coming across it for the first time or they're not familiar with it. And I think this is quite an individual thing. I think this will vary according to situations, but I would, if it was me, and I know this won't work for everyone, but if it was me, I would utilise the people that do understand to kind of help me make my point, especially if you're feeling low on energy as well. So if I knew that I had somebody come in who might not necessarily understand my condition, I would have a word with my parents and ask them to kind of like not sit down and explain, because I don't think that ever ends well. Like having too much of a formal situation, that can make people feel uncomfortable as well, which obviously isn't the aim. But I think just having people who can not back you up, that's not really the right word, but like people who can perhaps help you advocate. And again, advocate doesn't quite feel like the right word when you're talking about individuals and families, but just having people who can kind of help you to explain what your condition is, how it affects you, or like, to use one of my own examples, like if I had family around once and it was on quite a poorly day and I came downstairs in my pajamas for a bit, and then when my mum could see that I was like fading, like I do, I'm sure you do that as well, where you just kind of go, right, that's enough. It was my mum who's kind of said, okay, I think you should probably go and have a rest now. And I was really glad of that, because it kind of gave me the excuse to get up and go and rest. And like, it can just be helpful having that other person there. So I would say utilize other people who do understand. And obviously don't be afraid to say how things affect you. It's important that everyone does understand. So just be honest, I would say. And then I also found a resource for this as well, and that came from someone who I absolutely adore. It's Hannah from Stickman Communications. If you haven't seen Stickman Communications, you need to go and have a look at them, because they are amazing. And they create products, but they also create these kind of text infographics online, and they have a really brilliant social media presence, and they aim to kind of explain disability and chronic illness in a simple, straightforward way. So I will also leave a link to this in my Facebook post, but they have kind of like this informal infographic about Christmas time, and it kind of says in a nutshell, look, this is me at Christmas time, things are hard, and it's the aim of it is to just kind of have this thing that you can show people to avoid the kind of energy expenditure having to explain yourself and justify yourself, because really you shouldn't have to do that. So that's kind of how I would approach that one. Just be prepared, make use of people, maybe think about having that additional backup resource as well. We have a daughter with a rare condition, and you're right, it can be tedious to describe it over and over. Yes. We tend to, oh, that bit's cut off. We tend to use a very high level relatable example and then steer them to a website next time they're at a computer, like the foundation hospital in a graceful and thankful way, of course. Part of that is cut off, but I think I get the gist of that, and I agree with what you're saying. I think it can be helpful, and that's a really valid point as well. It can be helpful to give someone something to go away with, so they can kind of look at it in their own time and process it in their own time. I think that's a really valid point as well, and I think people having the information to kind of see for themselves can make a positive difference too. Maybe that's something that you could even do ahead of time as well. Although I suppose you would have to be careful with that. Like, you don't want it to seem like you're like briefing people. So again, I'd play it by ear, that one. But that's a really valid point. I agree. What's next? This was a good one. It was just kind of a general thought to share, and that was inclusive activities at Christmas time. Now, there's not enough. I will be the first one to say that. People have a range of additional needs, and I still don't think that inclusivity and accessibility is at the forefront as much as it should be, especially at this time of year. So when it comes to finding like family days out and accessible activities, especially if you have young ones, it can be a good idea to know where to look. Let's have a look, what's going on here? I need to get better at doing this. Hard for me is explaining to younger children who innocently ask, yes. Ah, that's a really good point. Yeah, I didn't actually think of that beforehand. Explaining it to young children. I'd be interested to hear if anybody watching it has any suggestions for that one, and maybe that's something that I can go away and ask people, because that's not actually something I have experience of myself. Yeah, do you know, I'm gonna go away and have a look at that as well, because that is a really valid point. I'm going to ask my friends that. Um, Stay tuned. We will talk about that one. I'll go away and look into that one. But thank you for bringing that up. That's a really valid point. Yeah, include. Okay, sorry. I flipped back and forth. Then I need to get better at like looking at this in real time. I will do that. So I was saying inclusive activities and knowing where to look for them. There's a few. What I found when I was looking into this, that there seems to be like a lack of like a central resource where you can find inclusive Christmas activities. But what I did find was it's a website I've not seen before called the Disabled Living Guide. And they have compiled a list of accessible like events and days out across the country. And they include things like Winter Wonderland in some of the major cities and like individual events. So I will also leave that linked. I hope you won't get sick of me saying this. And something really nice that came up. If you don't know me, I live up north in Yorkshire, and I'm based in York specifically. And in Harrogate, which isn't too far from me, there is a place called the Hearing Suite, and they are obviously for people with hearing impairments. And something that I thought was really lovely is that they're doing a Santa's Grotto this year for children with hearing impairments. So Santa is going to be able to sign. And I just thought that was such a lovely idea. And again, it fills a need that doesn't seem to be filled at the minute. So that got me thinking, are there other Santa's Grottos that are equipped to be inclusive? And again, there's a central resource lacking. But there is kind of like a compiled list of Santa's Grottos. You can Google that, but I'll link it again. And I suppose at the minute, the best way forward is to just contact the places individually and ask, which seems a bit of a faff, but I mean, yeah, we're not quite there yet. But hopefully, and again, if anybody knows of any other inclusive Santa's Grottos, maybe for people with like autism and Asperger's or learning difficulties, or even like just any kind of sensory overload, it would be really interesting to hear that. Yeah, so that's Santa's Grottos. And then again, if you don't know me, you'll know that if you don't know me, if you do know me, let's try that again. If you do know me, you'll know that I'm a big theatre fan. And something that I don't think is utilised enough are relaxed performances. So it's a great time of year for pantomime, and your local theatre will probably have a regional pantomime going on. And one thing that's worth looking into is to see whether they do any relaxed performances or any accessible performances. So sometimes they'll do like signed performances, they'll do audio description, audio captions. What else? Relaxed performances. They are primarily designed for people with additional needs who might perhaps be more disruptive and not able to attend like kind of like an original performance. But I also find the big advantage to relaxed performances if you have a chronic illness is that they tend to like draw back. I can't do words today. They tend to kind of reduce the special effects. So if you have things like sensory overload or like light and noise sensitivity, then relaxed performances are really worthwhile looking into. And I actually tried one for myself earlier this year. There's a post about it on my blog. So if you're wanting to see a show but you're concerned about how it might affect you, definitely have a look into relaxed performances. And if by any chance you're local, York Grand Opera House have Cinderella on at the minute with a really good cast. And I know for a fact that they have a relaxed performance this Friday, the 21st. So might be worth looking into. And it means that you can enjoy the same things as everyone else. Thank you, Brian. You should create a central resource for these great ideas if you have the time. Do you know, there's not enough hours in the day. I've really been frustrated recently because it is such a good idea and it just seems that people should be doing this. And it is something that I want to do, and I try to do that with things I can. Like, if any of you saw my previous live stream, you'll have heard me say that I don't like to sit and complain about things without doing something about them. And I do like the idea of creating a central resource, and it means a lot to me that you think I could do that, so thank you. I hope this is like a starting point at least anyway. And as I said, if anybody has anything to add, just let me know. And between us, we can do it. Oh, that made me smile. Thank you. The next kind of thing people raised was feeling left out at Christmas. And again, I'm sure this is something that a lot of you can relate to. And the fact of the matter is, Christmas is a really nice time, but it can also be a very difficult time for lots and lots of reasons. And for those of us who have health difficulties, it can feel like quite an isolating time of year. And again, this is something I've talked about before. I think there's a few ways to approach this. And I think the thing to realise, as much as I don't like to say it, is that you can't always join in with everything. And I think a big part of it is accepting it and thinking, okay, I can't do this, but what can I do? And again, I think forward planning and planning in advance to make sure that you have things in place that you can look forward to and you can join in with is a really important thing for your mental health as well as your physical health. So what did I write down for this? Yes, okay, bit of self-promo. Again, if you saw one of my earlier live streams, you might have heard me talking about Spoonie Christmas, which is a thing that we do on Instagram. So just in brief, every year I do a hashtag on Instagram, and this year the hashtag is Spoonie Xmas 2018. And the purpose of that is to give people a place they can come to upload their pictures and connect with other people. So even if you're stuck in bed or you can't get out of the house or you can't join in with Christmas activities in the typical sort of way, you have a place you can go where you can share what you're doing and you can connect with people in other situations. And the hope is that it will just help people to feel a little less alone and like spread a bit of kindness and all of that. Oh, I'm gonna cough. Oh, you're being so nice to me today. I don't deserve this. Thank you so much. Oh, making my day. If this oh gosh, I thought I shut the whole thing down then. That wouldn't have been good. Thank you. You're flattering me. I don't deserve this. But yeah, so if you do want to go and join in with that, the hashtag is SpoonieXmas 2018, and that's on Instagram, and you can also find me on Instagram at LifeOfPippa. So I hope that is one. I mean, it's not the solution. It's not the solution, but I hope that people know that it's there in case they need it. And aside from that, like I say, just forward planning, thinking about, gosh, where was I going with that? Thinking about what you can do and how you can be included, even if it's just a case of just having people, if you can't leave your bed that day, just having people who can come up and sit and talk to you for a bit. And maybe you can do some gentle activity in bed. So one thing I remember doing a few years ago are those, are they called paper rings? The things that you hang up, paper chains. And that's quite a nice gentle activity if you're okay using your hands. That's a nice gentle activity to do in bed. So yeah, just have a good think about it. I'm sure there will be blog posts on this as well. I might have a look, see if I can find any blog posts about that as well, actually. If not, again, something we need to get on. And then kind of related to this is, oh no, I had this down in this point. So no, I didn't. That's a lie. Never mind. Yeah, okay. Next one. The next point that people raised was pressure to join in. And again, yeah, that's a really valid point. It can be hard at times when you feel like, the thing about Christmas is that it is a joyful time of year, but to an extent it can sometimes feel forced, and you can feel like you should be joining in with things and you should be being proactive, and that can be difficult. And I know that something I've experienced in the past is feeling a bit guilty that I can't join in as much as I would like to, or perhaps as much as other people would like to. But at the end of the day, I think you have to remember that it is your Christmas too. And as good as it is to try and please everybody, you do have to look after yourself and you have to look after your health. And if you're saying yes to something for the sake of it, which again, I'm very guilty of doing, if you're saying yes because it will please other people, but at the same time it's going to make you ill and you're not going to enjoy yourself and the energy expenditure isn't going to be worth it, then in my eyes, it isn't worth it. And again, that's a very individual thing, because if you're an adult, there are going to be commitments that you have that perhaps you don't feel are worth the energy and you will have to spend it anyway. But there are also going to be circumstances which are a bit more flexible and negotiable. So I think it's just kind of having the confidence and knowing that it is okay to say no to things. And I remember somebody messaged related to this saying about anxiety, and feeling anxious about pleasing everybody and feeling anxious that they couldn't say no. And that really did kind of get to me, because I don't think anybody should feel like that, especially at Christmas. And I think if you're surrounded by the right kind of people, the last thing they would want is for you to feel like that. So I think that's important to take into consideration as well. And I think if you can communicate with people how you're feeling, and just, I think kind of the bottom line of that one is to please people where you can, but don't do it for the sake of your health. Don't do it at the expense of your health, rather. Just find the balance, find what works for you, and enjoy yourself as much as you can whilst looking after yourself, I think would be the conclusion there. I've just realised I didn't even acknowledge the fact that I'm wearing an Olaf one. I put it on in the spirit of this live stream, so I hope you appreciate this. It says, "I like warm hugs," and it is actually really cozy. It's like wearing a blanket. Anyway, this was a really interesting one. Somebody messaged and said, "I'm worried about not having enough to talk about with relatives, and I'm worried about conversational topics around the table." And they kind of went on to say that that was because when they felt that their life was kind of at the moment dominated by chronic illness, and they were worried that they weren't going to have enough to share with people and enough to talk about. And again, really, I'm very conscious of repeating myself, but it is a valid point, and I'm sure a lot of people will share those concerns. And again, I have had those concerns. But the key here, I think everyone will agree that people like to talk about themselves. So if you're ever at a point where you're struggling for things to say, turn it back on them, get them talking about themselves, problem solved. So, you know, and again, it can be wise to think in advance, think of some conversation starters. I did find a blog post with some like conversation starters, which I will link. I think you do have to be careful with conversation starters, because while I was looking for these, there were some very like, very like conversation starters that were good in theory, but you just wouldn't say in conversation. It would just feel like starched and awkward. So do be careful with conversation starters, but it can be good to have a think about these things in advance. And again, utilize your relatives. Just, you know, have a think about it in advance, and if in doubt, ask them a question and people will talk about themselves. If you feel lonely, my advice is to let people know. Loved ones will want to be around you, they may just not realise it. Yes, couldn't agree more. At the end of the day, it's a time to be around people as much as you can, when you can. And I think a big thing as well, when you have a chronic illness that's perhaps not easily visible, is that unless you communicate it, people might not assume that you're feeling the way that you are. So communicating can be a big thing, and just letting people know that you're perhaps feeling this way can encourage them to kind of take that into consideration and be aware of it, because otherwise it might not be that they're deliberately, in fact, it won't be that they're deliberately not accounting for your feelings. They just might not be aware of it. So yeah, communication is key. Oh, I sound like I should have like a snapback on and like a camp leader. Ugh, I know what I'm saying. Okay. So we've done pressure to join in, we've done conversation topics. And the one I wanted to end it on, I thought this was a really lovely thing, and I thought this was really representative of the chronic illness community in general, because somebody's concern was, and I'm not naming people when I do these, because I think people would prefer to be anonymous, but I know this person, and I know that a lot of people will feel this as well. Their concern, I said, "What's your concern for Christmas?" And they said, knowing that other people aren't happy. And I just thought that was like such a mindful thing to say, and something that a lot of people can feel, especially when you've been through something like disability or chronic illness yourself. I do find that you become a lot more aware of kind of hardships in the least pessimistic way possible. You do become aware that not everything is peachy all the time. There are people out there who won't have a Merry Christmas, and it makes me sad to acknowledge it, but it's true. And everyone's circumstances differ. No, I won't say that everybody has something to be grateful for, because that's quite a naive way to view things. But what am I trying to say? I think it's important to count your blessings at this time of year, but it's also important to acknowledge that not everybody will be as fortunate as you are, regardless of your circumstances. So they said how to deal with feeling like this at this time of year, feeling that you can't help everybody. And I think not the gist, why can't I do words today? I think kind of like the nitty gritty is knowing that you can't please everybody. You can't, it's impossible. But what you can do, and something that I try to live by, is do what you can with what you have. So I thought of a few charities that you could perhaps look into or support at this time of year. And again, not everyone's going to be in a position to financially support, but support can take many other forms too. And again, do what you can with what you have. So the one that always gets me is that there are going to be homeless people at this time of year. And it's like where I am at the minute, it's bitter cold. And that gets me down. So one charity that I'm going to try and support this year is Crisis, which helps address the issue of homelessness in a practical way. And this is the thing, I always try to go for ones that provide practical support at this time of year, because as important as other causes are, I think it's actually directly assisting people that you need to be conscious of at this time of year. So Crisis for Homelessness, the Trussell Trust, which does really good work providing food banks and access to food for people who don't have that access. And then one slightly different, which I just wanted to end on, is Project Parent, which is run by my amazing friend Kate. And what they do, they're just actually finishing up for this year, but they do this on an annual basis. So they provide care packages for parents and carers who have kids in hospital over Christmas, which is obviously a really lovely cause. And yeah, they do brilliant work. Kate works tirelessly year round, tirelessly year round, doing brilliant work. So they are just three of many charities that you can support. Yeah, and that was kind of the most practical way I could answer that question. I think it's just knowing that you can't help everybody, but knowing that you've done your bit, kind of is the way to combat that. So if you know that you have done what you can, and I mean, just saying that, it doesn't have to be donating money, like I said, even just reaching out and saying a kind word to someone on social media, or if you know someone who might be lonely at this time of year, just kind of having the initiative to go forward and say, is there anything I can do for you? I'm thinking of you. And I think it's just really important to show that you care at this time of year and do what you can with what you have. And let that be enough. Do what you can and let that be enough. I think is what I would say to that person and anybody else who might be feeling like that. And I hope that makes sense. And I hope it doesn't sound too cheesy, but I do think it's a really important thing to give at this time of year. Been talking, I'm very conscious I've been talking for quite a while, but these were the main kind of questions. I kind of grouped them into topics, like I said, and they were the main things that people brought up. So if anyone does watch this back who asked a question, I really hope that at least gives you a starting point and gives you something to think about. And if you do have any further questions, contact me at any time. So my blog is lifeofpippa.co.uk. Wow, that was loud. My neighbours. So my blog is lifeofpippa.co.uk. I'm Life of Pippa blog on Facebook. I'm Life of Pippa with an _ on Twitter, and I'm Life of Pippa on Instagram if you want to find me. And like I say, I will do a Facebook post with all of the links that I mentioned, and I really hope that's helpful. So do go and have a look at that. I will try and have that up today. And I think that's all I want to say to now. Oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? It's been a very long week and it's only Tuesday. I think that's all I want to say for now. But I also wanted to say thank you to anybody who watched this live, because it is so nice to have people to interact with while you're doing this. So thank you so much for joining in. It means a lot to me, and especially for your kind words this time as well. That really made me smile. And if we don't speak before, I hope you have a really lovely Christmas, and here's to the healthiest and happiest 2019 possible. So thank you to Zubia for having me as always, and I will see you very soon. Bye.